And we're back at you live. It's Mark Lindsay and Eloy Escajedo. This is the Trampled Underfoot Podcast show. And by the way, this is the 250th episode. So this is a milestone type deal. Right, Mark?
And they said it would never last.
They did. The naysayers, they put us up in vanity as a one hit wonder. Over on Rolling Stones, they wrote up that article that really treated us like dirt,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we crossed that Rubicon
Mm-hmm. What did they say? Glaringly unsophisticated. Yeah,
with a
yeah,
dash of salt and pepper.
yeah, yeah. I'm not.
Not quite,
I'm
not
not
quite.
one to argue, so I'm not going to argue. But that's a fair assessment.
They said not quite millennials by a long shot.
Oh hell no. Oh hell, I got Roman numerals on my watch when I can remember to wear it.
But you do know millennials by this stage of the game are no longer that group. There's now like
Right.
two more groups behind that. Just
Yeah,
so that
and
you
and
know.
and they're getting trashed.
No, I'm like saying like we're
Mhm.
we're like the previous or the millennial, which is 2000s kids.
Yeah.
That's that.
Oh yeah.
Those are now.
They're all the man, and now there's two new generations come up going, man, you suck. And meanwhile, us from the '60s are like, yes,
You're kind of like, we've talked about this, but you're kind of like really 1 foot in Generation X and 1 foot in the baby boomers.
yeah. It depends on who you talk to. Some will say, oh well, Generation X goes up to, started in whatever and goes up to whatever, and the baby boomers went up to, I mean, there's that stretch in there between, like, say, 1958 and 1965, where we don't know what the hell we are. So we're just, I don't even care.
That's really boomers at the end of the day. So you could officially say you're a boomer.
I could say a lot of things. I don't know what I am. I mean, I just don't care.
Well, no, let's
You know?
categorize, stamp you, wrap you with a frizzly
Okay.
thing,
Okay.
and put you on a shelf.
I am generation uses full sentences and punctuation in text messages. That's who I am.
Mr. Wilson, control yourself.
Well, I don't use the text speak. When I mean you, I spell it YOU, and I capitalize and use a period, and then capitalize the first letter of the next sentence.
You know what you remind me of? You remind me of back in Mesopotamia when we were doing the cuneiform. I always did that extra little bird's feet at the end, but you, Charles, you did not do that bird's feet, and so you're passe, and I'm with it.
Yeah.
2,000, 3,000, 4,000, how many ever thousand years after the fact.
It's like, what does this bird's foot mean? I don't know.
Well, you know how
Yeah, it's a prehistoric emoji. I don't know.
it could. What if all those things
Steve
are actually?
Twitter winky face.
Maybe we take the past. Well, I do. No, but this is a joke because I really. But maybe they're doing the same thing we're doing, like when we're writing messages. Dude, I don't want to go to the store. Oh, I'll catch you later. Oh, I gotta fix that light bulb or whatever. Which they are, but like it's all that sort of regular human stuff. But when we get our hands on it from like 3,000 years ago, we're like, holy, which it is cool.
Yeah, it is, but we don't know. Is it a shopping list? Is it a rude letter from one guy telling another dude that he doesn't want his business anymore, or what? We don't know what the hell
That guy that's now turned to stone in Pompeii, holding that grocery list in front of the grocer, and he was just about to say, "My wife Martha wanted me to get," and he just froze.
Which makes me wonder. All right, now this is absolutely completely off the wall here. Have you ever heard anybody talk about ancient graffiti?
Some.
I don't mean like, carvings on a temple or something like that, but I mean, nobody back in ancient Rome picked up something and wrote something dirty on a wall.
They did.
And it just got preserved.
They did. There's plenty of that stuff.
I have not heard about that.
Yeah, you can find it. You can find it on the internet. They
I just had never thought about it. I'm gonna have to check it out.
like if a politician or some
Hmm.
sort of they'll do like with a big nose, like
Hmm.
the same stuff we would do, they would do back then. I mean, it really hasn't.
Yo mama's so fat when she sits around the Coliseum, she really sits around the Coliseum. No.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
I don't
pretty
know.
amazing. It's
Okay.
fun.
One of those thoughts that flash, man.
Yeah, they did. They did do graffiti
Hmm.
in their way. Obviously we're
Hmm.
as a society more highly stylistic with our
Yeah.
spray paint bottles and whatnot. But
Yeah. Spray cans are a little bit more convenient than oil paints. You got
yeah,
to run around with a palette and a brush and everything and hope like hell the centurions don't catch you before it dries.
well, did you hear about that Viking that went to Constantinople or something like that? Or yeah, in Istanbul, and he etched in this huge place his name, and he
Hmm.
says like Argard was here.
Hmm.
Have you seen that one?
No, I haven't. I've never looked into it. It was just something that just flashed into my brain now.
Well, look,
Hmm.
it's still etched there
Hmm.
for like forever,
Hmm.
and it's written in Viking.
Wow.
So, but it's not in a Viking area.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like one of those curiosities, because they did trade and they did invade and they did all
Yeah.
these things. So in the end, he was probably there, waiting on a boat. Who knows what he was
Spent a
doing?
little time in the pub and was drunk. Just
Yeah,
decided this wall looks good.
yeah.
Okay. Steve says, yes, they did all over in the tomb builders' houses. Okay. Now that brings about an interesting question. All over in the tomb builders' houses. I would imagine they don't know who actually did it,
Who did what?
who wrote this stuff in the tomb builders' houses. But if you were to get a can of spray paint right now and write something on your wall inside your room right there, does that count as graffiti?
For the people in the future, who knows?
Yeah, because I mean, you could spray paint on your wall right now. Eloy was here, but does that count as graffiti?
I think graffiti is more like the act of in public places.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Okay, all
In
right.
order
Well,
to mark it in public, like leave your mark in public or whatnot.
yeah,
Dogs
I
do it
think
all
so
the
too.
time.
Yeah, yeah. This is mine. This is mine. This is mine. This is mine.
Is that what they're doing? Because when I take Vigo out, is it okay? In my mind, I'm thinking, is he leaving little urine crumbs
Yes.
so that he can come back and sniff his way back?
Oh, no, he's marking territory,
So he's not saying,
and he's showing dominance because he was the last one to do it. Therefore, my scent is stronger than yours, so I'm dominant. I'm top dog.
that's funny.
I could go further, but I'm not going to do that. Yeah, Jim Dockrell says it's P-mail. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay, today is September 19th. That means today is International Talk Like a Pirate Day. I'm not going to do it because I think it's kind of goofy. But do you happen to know where that yar pirate thing came from?
I think you have in the past mentioned it, but I forget now.
It was 100% because of one guy. And his name was, oh my gosh, Robert Newton. And he was an actor from the West Country in England. And he was a serious actor, but he was cast to play Long John Silver in Treasure Island, the Disney movie Treasure Island. Then he played Blackbeard in Blackbeard the Pirate, another movie. And he had a West Country accent, which he kind of ramped up. And because of those two movies, we have the pirate speak. Every pirate after that was portrayed somewhat
With the
similar to
R.
that type of accent. Yeah. And it turns out that at the time when he was growing up, he grew up in the West Country. Uh, at the time, yar was a slang for yes. So that's all it meant. Are you going downtown later? Yar. Okay. That kind of thing.
And so it's become R.
Yeah. And that's exactly where it is.
And nobody ever thinks about
Uh-uh.
why is it that they say R? That makes it automatically a pirate. Nobody ever thinks of how tracing that back.
No.
They just do it, and that okay, that's pirate. We got it. Stamp that one.
So basically, that accent, that type of pirate speak started in 1950 when that film was released. Before that, they spoke whatever, whatever language from wherever they grew up with whatever accent.
They may have not even had any remotely the same sounding thing as
Mm-mm.
the guy.
Nope. If they were from the West Country, they were from the West Country. If they were from down south, they were from down south. There were French pirates. There were pirates from all nations, basically. Any seafaring nation, there were pirates. There were some Spanish. There were some French. There were English. I mean, whatever.
Yeah,
Portuguese.
there were Dutch.
Yeah, Dutch, Portuguese. I mean, you name it. It's just weird to me. But the whole Pirate Day, International Pirate Day thing was started in 1995 by two guys, I'm sad to say, from Albany, Oregon. And they they were going to do it in June, but they decided no, they didn't want it to be in June for some reason, out of respect for the observance of the Normandy landings and things like that. So one of the two dudes that started doing it, he selected his ex-wife's birthday, which was September 19th, just because it was a day he wouldn't forget.
And that's for what? Pirates Day?
That's for International Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Damn. I wonder how many people are doing that today.
I don't know, man. They started talking about it to a couple of comedians, and it got on to one guy, Dave Barry, who was a big time comedian back in the 90s. And he wrote about it in a couple of articles, and it just kind of took off from there.
That
And
had to be quite the life, these pirates.
probably not a good one, you know.
No.
But then again, I mean, they were there. When you pulled into port, you could just as easily split. But
Nobody would find you either.
no,
Because, I mean, it's not like they were tracked the way we are.
yeah.
Because, I mean, in effect, we have ID and this and that. And
Hmm.
I do know that in Spain they used to, like, let's say you wanted to move from Spain to Cuba.
Hmm.
You had to go to your local government
Hmm.
and ask for them to give you that passport, stamp it, and whatnot.
Hmm.
I'm talking about for the past few hundred years. And they would do that and they would write out how you look, family, all that stuff. But you could still,
Yeah,
if you think about it,
I think with most countries, it was just could you afford passage? If you could afford to book your passage, fine, go. There
well,
wasn't like passport control or anything like that back then.
no, it was in Spain because remember, I get a sense it was for everything. But I don't know that, so
Yeah.
we'll leave it at that part. But for Spain, for sure, if you wanted to leave, you had to go to your local government, and
Hmm.
and I could tell you because remember, everything was taxed just like it is today,
Hmm.
but they didn't have the same um, level of technology, obviously, but they did have
Sure.
paperwork in order to secure that this tax liability or whatever the opposite of that is What's the opposite of liability?
No asset,
Asset
benefit. Yeah.
is going over there, so they're going to be making money over there, and which we will get a portion of. Um,
Oh, okay.
so there was always that, and then the local government would then take up those documents and then register it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, even 1, 2, 3, 400 years ago.
I don't know. I really don't know about France if they were like that. England, basically, if you could afford passage and you wanted to go to, say, the New World, to the colonies, they were like, if you can afford passage,
No, they had to
don't let
be.
the don't let the door hit you on the way. Well, no, because
No,
it was still part of the crown. It was still part of the. They were colonies.
I think that it's still well. Okay, I can't speak for the other places, but like situations like the Canary Islands, for instance,
Hmm.
under the under the umbrella of the Crown of Spain, you had Genovese as an example, and like
Hmm.
this is like a literal example. Although I forget the specific name of the person, but they would be contracted for whatever voyage type deal,
Hmm.
so they would acquire paperwork so that the crown knows that this person's working for us, and then that
Well,
person would go to that island, and
well,
then they would go to their local governmental thing, just like we do today with like
well,
I don't DNV or whatever.
don't get me wrong. They booked passage so they knew who was going where, but it wasn't like, oh no, you can't leave London. We need you back over here in this stable shoeing horses like you've been doing for the last 20 years. It was like, you can afford to book passage, you can go. Okay, your name's going down on the manifest, but you're just a passenger that's going to um, New York or whatever. You know, it wasn't total control, but it was okay. We know who's on this ship, and if it's lost at sea, we know who to contact.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like they did
Yeah.
document
Hmm.
to the degree that they. I mean,
Oh yeah, they had passenger manifests and things like that, but it wasn't like you had to go to passport control and, you know, have a visa to go to this country or that. That hadn't been really put into place yet.
you know,
In most places, I'm sure some they did.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm sure there were some city states in Italy on the ports and what have you that are like, yeah, okay, you can dock here and reprovision, but none of your sailors can come ashore. I'm sure there was something like that. They
yeah.
wanted control over who was coming and going.
Well, yeah. I mean, because the idea is that it's the money and stuff, and well, there's also
Sure.
the fact that you're having people on if some crime occurs. I mean, just a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff. Even back then, like let's say in the 1500s,
Hmm.
there's documentation of that. Um, Plenty. In
Hmm.
order to cross to the Americas, anybody coming from Spain,
Hmm.
um, they had to know where they're going,
Hmm.
you know, and they would have their, I guess, what do they call it? Expedient or there's a word that they use. In any event, it's a document, and then it would instead of like obviously no photographs in the 1500s, but they would write out, black hair, medium
Hmm.
height, complexion,
Oh
eye
yeah.
color, and this and that to get a sort of so in case Johnny did something not nice,
Yeah.
or if he owed money
Yeah. That
or
it,
anything.
yeah, and that's something else. They did have passenger manifest for that reason. If you were wanted and you're trying to get the hell out of Dodge, they wanted to know who was leaving.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that, but I mean, it wasn't like they were under total control and no, you can't leave without this paperwork, that paperwork, or the other
Oh no,
paperwork.
people could
They just took
disappear.
down yeah, they just took down your particulars and go. I mean,
Yeah.
there's cases all over the place where um, people deserted the military and then turned up in like Australia or in New England or
Got
somewhere
new
else,
names.
Canada. Yeah, had new names and what have you, because there wasn't really any sanctioned identification system. So,
I mean, I don't know in what air for sure that wasn't the case and I would assume that wasn't the case with um the Netherlands, and I'm sure it wasn't the case with Germany, nor was it the case with Italy. I don't think it was the case, and I don't think it was the case with um, the British Isles. I would assume, without knowing, that the
Mhm.
British Isles would have had, at least at the time. I'm sure there's documents that can be found, but I'm sure that they would have had in the event of someone. Well, the ship, like you're saying, but in the event that someone, I mean, hell, you had to know who you're taxing or collecting from or
Yeah.
any number of things. It's not
Eh,
like
well, that was the purpose of the Doomsday Book in the UK. Was more or less it was not it was a lot more than just another census. It was who you were, where you were, what tract the land you were occupying, by what authority, and I'm just list by names. And there were other reasons for it. It did a lot of things, but that's one of the things it did was figured out exactly who was who, where you were, where you lived, and by what authority you lived there. And it was one of the first real records on that huge of a scale ever kept. So it
and that
was,
was illegal. That was a governmental.
yeah, let me, that was, see, when was that written? It was written in 1086. Um, it was the Great Survey of much of England and parts of Wales, uh, done at the behest of King William the First or William the Conqueror. So it was uh, its main purpose was to record the annual value of every piece of landed property to its lord and the resources inland, the labor force, and livestock from which that value was derived. So
Yeah, they weren't.
they weren't, oh, you froze up. Or did I freeze up? Did I freeze up or did you freeze up? Can anybody out in the chat hear me? Did I freeze up or did Eloy freeze up? Eloy froze. Okay, Steve, thank you. Well, watch me tap dance until he either unfreezes or comes back, one or the other. Uh, this is good. Oh, man. Well, we'll figure it out. Jim Dockrell says, okay, yeah, they had a census for over 2,000 years. It's why Joseph and Mary traveled to Bethlehem. There's some controversy about that because there's no real written record of that census. It's not to say that it didn't happen, it's just that there's no written record of it. But what the heck? Let's see. Eloy froze. Okay, thank you for that. Oh man. Is International Talk Like a Pirate Day a bank holiday? Not in the US. I can't speak for anywhere else, but not here. Let's see what happens. Is he going to come back or not? Hmm. I never did ask him about the weather there. I don't know if they're having any storms back there, or if internet. Yeah, really, it's more of a bar holiday, right? And the longer you've been at the bar, the more pirate-like people tend to want to talk. We remember it here simply because it's the day after Linda's birthday. Yes, yesterday was Linda's birthday. Happy birthday, Linda. So it's easy for us to remember the date. Well, this may be interesting. If he doesn't come back in the next few minutes, we may have to postpone and try this another night. but we'll see what happens. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, I've got nothing else to talk about. Um, yep. Exactly. Florida. You'll never know what'll happen there. Um, Linda, remember I showed you that live thing down there underneath the video pane? Uh, put your cursor down below the video pane and click on live if you don't have the red LED, because I think you're behind by about a minute, minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes. But we'll see. Yeah, you never know what's going to happen down there. It could be one of his neighbors trying to get free electricity and zapped himself. That doesn't generally happen down there. That doesn't generally happen down there. Up in northern Florida, yeah. You don't believe what, Greg? Nothing to talk about. Okay. All right. And Steve says there are storms in the Miami area. Well, as I sit here, it is 6:57 p.m. on the West Coast. So if he's not back by 5 after 7, I'll just go ahead and call it, and we'll wait till he comes back up. But we'll see what happens. He may be sitting in the dark cursing right now. Jim Dockerel, a gator got him. Well, it has to have opposable thumbs to get through the door. Well, just to get through the gate to get into his yard. But, you know, we were talking about that before we went live, talking about being in rough neighborhoods. And I'm like, look, I've been in rough neighborhoods. I've never had to wrestle an alligator, and you have. So, it's all relative. So, yeah, see, I think you're behind. So he's just messaged me. He said he had a power bump, and so everything is restarting. So we may end up rescheduling this for when he's not having storms. I'm telling him now, okay, I'm tap dancing as hard as I can. We'll see. Yeah, his dog ate his internet. Yeah. Oh man, this is what happens when you go live. It's what happens when you go live. Well, that's all right. I mean, okay, knock it off, Jim. Oh man, this is really something. Let's see what happens when he gets back here. I think he sent me a message from his phone. We'll see if okay, it's straight up 7 here on the West Coast. If he ain't back by 5 after, I'll go ahead and call it. Yeah, I'm 29 in dog years, Jim. So, oh. Yeah, Steve, that's what he said. He told me that he had to fire everything back up, and trying to get his computer back up. But if he had one power bump, he's probably going to have 2 or 4. So we'll see what happens. You got the same message. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. This is hilarious. we came into this without anything really to talk about. Just was going to kind of throw a few things back and forth at each other, and then start talking about uh, 250 episodes and maybe do a little bit of a retrospective. We'll see. But it's kind of strange. We started this based on a couple of recommendations from friends, because whenever he and I got into the same hangout, we would automatically default to talking about music and talking about guitars and things like this. And a couple of people, not everybody, of course, a couple of people thought it was kind of interesting, and they're like, "You guys need to do a podcast." I said, really? And then one of said friends had a deal with a podcast host, and so we just started doing it. And you mean we might have to listen to the stuff you've already talked about again? Well, I think you do that every week, Steve. I mean, 250 episodes, you kind of start running out of stuff. You know what I mean? And there are people who would argue we started running out of stuff after 20 episodes. But, you know, y'all keep coming back. Oh, man. Well, come on, dude. That Windows 7 computer of yours. Might have to get on the Chromebook, dude. Yeah, Zombies Revisited. Absolutely. We even tried to bring back the discussion about the lizard people, and it didn't go nowhere. So we started doing this on, we were doing it on audio. We would, Eloy would set it up on his YouTube account, and we would get in here and we would talk. It was just him and I. And then we would save it, and then he would link me to it, and he would edit it one week, I would edit it the next week. We'd just switch off back and forth, and netted it down to about an hour long, and then put it on the podcast platform just in audio. And that kind of picked up. It kind of went somewhere, and then it started coming back down. And we were like, well, you know, we're not really going anywhere on the audio side, but the folks that join us for the live on YouTube, they seem to like it. Yeah, it was about after episode 25, I think, something like that. We decided to go live and do it on YouTube, let other people watch us do it. We created the Trampled Underfoot YouTube page, and he and I are both admins of it. And Steve is too. I believe you're either an admin or a moderator. I don't remember, one or the other. But we just kept doing it here, and just kept going with it. And now I think we'd miss it. Yeah, Steve says he's been here since day one. May as well stick it out now. Yeah. Truthfully, what would you do with your Tuesday evenings? Yeah. Making sure we don't talk trash or disgrace Tarneal Media. We're always talking trash. Greetings. Welcome to the Trampled Underfoot Podcast.
Thank you. Jeez.
What happened, man?
Well, we have a band of rain that's,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess, but really what I think is that the guy at the electrical plant just likes to screw with the thing. Was it only just one little second? What is that? Doesn't
It
it either
happens.
go on or off and that's it?
No, it could be anything. Could be anything. Could have been
No,
somebody hit a. Could have been somebody hit a power pole 8 blocks away, and the switch had to flip. It could have been anything.
Well, they should have backup.
They do,
Insta-
but it has to come on.
I'm telling you, dude, we're living in the dark ages.
You ever have the power go out on you when you worked at the casino? Even just a minor fluctuation?
I don't remember.
We did, and it was weird because the first thing, like the blackjack dealers, the first thing they would do if the lights dimmed down, dive over the table, cover up all the chips,
Right.
so nobody reaches out and grabs a stack of $100 chips or something like that. And then the generator would kick on. The rest of the damn town could be in total darkness, but we had huge generators. The casino was open.
It was just a little flicker, but it
Uh-huh.
created a whole avalanche of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to my other computer, the laptop,
Mm-hmm.
and I kept trying to get in to tell you,
Mm-hmm.
but the internet was still not
Yeah.
charged up from the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh, I'll just get on there." But then I
Mm-hmm.
realized that the screen is so small, and in order to get access, I have to make one of those numbers from StreamYard to get you back
Yeah.
into the. And it was the whole thing. So I just went to Facebook and said, "Hey," but
Okay.
it took this long. How long was it? Was it quick?
It was. I said that if I didn't hear from you by 5 after, I was going to go ahead and call it, and then you and I could get together after you got power restored or what have you. And it was about that time I got the message. I got your message. I said, okay, he's reloading again, so I'd give it a little bit longer. And then you came in right at 5 after.
I was
So,
doing because I was thinking, Mark's gonna think that, it's a but I can get back on. It was just a flicker, but
mhm.
one little flicker
Yeah.
is all she wrote, dude. It completely ruins the whole thing.
Yeah, Steve says usually power flashes like that are caused by a relay having a delay. Yeah. If something happens somewhere, like I said, somebody hits a telephone pole or something like that, um, there's a relay that senses a power cut and it reroutes power as far as it can. So you never know. A block and a half over, they may be without power.
Yeah, but this place is always. I mean, these people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, then again, let me not complain too much because at the end
Yep.
of the day, we do have power. So
Yeah, Linda and I were talking about that earlier today. I really, I mean, there's a lot of things wrong. There are a lot of things wrong, but I really don't have anything to complain about. You know what I mean? I got a roof over my head. I'm not sweating my tail end off because it's so hot. I'm not freezing to death in the wintertime. I have options when it comes to what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. We have options. We've got a fridge and a freezer full of food. None of our bills are past due. We're ahead on everything else. We have a credit account. It's called Care Credit. It's for if you need to go to the doctor or dentist or something, and there's a large bill, you can put it on that credit card. And if you pay that off within 18 months, it's zero interest, right? I got a statement today. It said my balance is zero and my minimum payment is zero. And I'm like, why are you sending me a statement? I know my balance is zero. So, but thank you for acknowledging that my balance is zero.
I
But
mean, you could be
yeah,
in
I got no car payment. I mean, the only real obligations we have are our utilities. Um, I pay a monthly fee for my website, and we have a mortgage and insurance. That's it. I mean, I got nothing to complain about, really.
I mean, if we dial the clock back, we could be in ancient Egypt chopping stones for a living.
I mean, yeah, I could be 19 years old working at U-Haul, like I was. I mean, rent was only 125 a month, but that was a week and a half's pay. So, yeah, I could. I've been in a lot worse positions in my life, but right now, I'm more than happy, man. I'm very comfortable. I'm not rich, but I'm very comfortable in that our income is more than enough to meet our obligations. And I mean, yeah, it's enough. I'm satisfied.
You're not rich,
Hmm.
relatively speaking.
Yeah, but I don't have the obligations that rich people have either. You
I'm
know,
just saying,
yeah.
relative to, let's say, Cuba.
Oh
If
yeah. Oh yeah. You go. I mean, you don't even have to go that far.
I
I mean,
actually I don't, it's right down the road.
you can go to neighborhoods in your town where, yeah, you're rich, because I know everything's relative, but we're pretty middle class. I mean, and not
No,
upper middle class
but
either.
what I wanted to say is that take Cuba for instance. If you were to get someone from over there that's lived there all their life,
Oh yeah.
and this doesn't apply for everyone because there's people that make do in ways because they have connections and this and that. That's how things work in that type of system. If you have right connections,
Hmm.
you know, but the rest of the people are screwed. But if you got one of those people and brought them to your house,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
average, modest, normal,
Yeah.
they would be blown away.
There's.
One, just the fact that you have electricity.
Hmm.
Just the fact that you have electricity, because the electricity over there comes on and off
Hmm.
willy nilly in order
Oh
to
yeah.
save energy costs because, you know,
Yeah.
they control it all. The government controls it all. So what ends up happening is that nothing works right.
There is. I heard about this. I don't remember which video it was on, but somebody was talking about the comments section, and a few people jumped in and confirmed it. They were talking about in South Africa, they have planned blackouts overnight to save electricity, to save energy,
Yeah,
where after a certain time, just there's no electricity.
that's right.
And I'm like, holy cow, really? I mean, what year is this? You know? But
Well, yeah.
I don't know. We're very spoiled here. And that's why I say, even with all the problems in the world, I really got nothing to complain about.
Well, I mean, again, it's all relative. So in the context of us here, as opposed to them there, and as opposed
Hmm.
to us here and what other people are
Yeah.
living at here, the poorest at the bottom of the rung here,
Hmm.
compared to a place like Cuba, let's say.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they'll have a house,
Hmm.
but maybe they can't fix the shower head, or the you know
Or the
the water,
roof.
or the roof, or the water doesn't run,
Yeah.
and they have to go
Um,
bucket it outside. So in relative, so I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, it's better to be, let's say, dirt poor here as opposed to dirt poor in other places,
yeah.
because on the average scale, I don't know the numbers, but I think there's numbers out there that can be,
Yeah.
Americans in general.
Yeah. You aren't filtering the water in a mud puddle down the road for your drinking water.
Yeah,
You're not digging through somebody else's trash for your next meal. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Jim Dockrell says, look at the nighttime satellite photos of North Korea. Yeah, look at the Korean Peninsula. You can find nighttime satellite photos of the Korean Peninsula. All of North Korea, except for Pyongyang, is dark at night. And then it's only certain parts of Pyongyang. And South Korea looks like daytime just about.
Hmm.
Even the most rural of places has got electricity. Then again, it's a geographically small nation where it's easier to run 200,000 miles of cable than it is to run 200 million miles of cable. So, I mean, we've got large dark places here in the US, mostly where nobody lives. So,
Well, yeah, electricity's everywhere.
ain't no street lights in Death Valley. So,
but it's also a product of the system. So we have a system where not just us, but like the
Mhm.
broader system of the government performs duties
Mhm.
that the public at large cannot perform, but in that balance, there's a level of autonomy for the individual citizen to go about their business and acquire,
Mhm.
within this balance of
Yeah.
whatnot. Whereas other places, that balance is all out of whack, where the government gets it all and the
Well,
people are basically cattle.
but a lot of what we do as far as infrastructure is concerned, and I'm not talking about roads, but let's just take electricity, for example. Most of that is privatized, unless you run a public utility. Most of that is privatized. Now, I know we lived in Nevada. NV Energy was the power company. And let's say you bought a parcel of land, you bought 10 acres, it was off the grid, but there was power close by. You could contract with NV Energy to run power to your house. At the time we looked into that, we were looking at a couple of properties. It was like $3,500 per power pole. So if they had to run two poles to connect you up, that's 7 grand plus your meter and all that other good stuff to hook you up to run power to your lot. And they would do it. Where we were, there was no natural gas on our street. And there were a couple of people who wanted to go on natural gas. And the gas company said, we'll have to dig up along the street, and we won't do that for just one house. The gas main ends at your road. We can take it down the road, but what you'll need to do is get at least 5 neighbors to go along with it, and you all share the cost. And then each individual home will pay for its meter and get hooked up and all that other good stuff. And for us, we were the second house in. For us, it would have been $1,600. To me, it wasn't worth it to have natural gas running. So I said thanks, but no thanks. Now, I don't know what the neighbors down our road said, but we didn't want to take part in it because we had no need, had no want for natural gas. But these were private utilities. And so that's where a lot of that came from. I know there was a developer who built along one road out in the little town that we lived in. They built like 8 houses down one road, and they paid the power company and the gas company to go ahead and run power out there. And when they did, 2 other properties hooked in after the power was run. So, a lot of it is private, but then again, a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is on public utility. And then they have to do it for a certain number of houses to make it worthwhile.
And the utilities are um, co co-managed to a degree or subsidized to a degree
Yeah.
by government
Yes.
through contracting and whatnot. So there's, I guess the point is that we do have the ability to expand and
Hmm.
seek out our own necessities, um, and there's a balance there. But in these
Sure.
other places, what they've done is that they've replaced the autonomy of the
Oh,
citizen
yeah. Well, it's nationalized. Yeah.
with the power of the state. So the state becomes the
Hmm.
all-seeing eye, um, that
Yeah.
controls from their ivory tower. But that's what I'm saying. So like, I've had um, friends, relatives, and acquaintances that I've met that have come from over there here,
Hmm.
and there's videos online. There's a guy and his wife,
Hmm.
and he always goes into like a Walmart or something. You've seen it, and he's always like, "Wow," and he'll cry, and she's like,
Yeah. That's Yoel and Mary, I believe.
"Well, they'll ask, why are you crying?" And he's like, "I wish." Why is it that just 90 miles away,
Can't have that. Yeah.
there's nothing, and over here, just 90 miles away, there's all these. Why can't we over the? Why can't my mother? Why can't my you know?
I
So that's a shock to people.
I saw one episode where they went to Home Depot, and he just walking up an aisle, he saw a roll of tar paper, roofing paper, and he stood there and stared at it.
Yeah,
And she come back
perplexed.
and she asked him, she says, "What's the matter?" He says, "Do you know how much my mother would love to have had this?" Not his father, his mother. "Do you know how much my mother would have loved to have had this to put up on the roof of our house? Because there were holes all over the place and this, that, and the other. And you can just come here and buy it or not even look at it."
And
He
the
ended up, he bought a tool belt just so he could have a tool belt.
and the abundance of the products.
Hmm.
It's not
Yeah.
like there's one on the shelf
Yeah.
like these places. If you're lucky,
Yeah.
and if you think about it, so when my father left at the age of 20
Hmm.
in 19, I was going to say 16, in 1962,
Hmm.
the country of Cuba had not gone in decline in terms of its actual infrastructure slash
Yeah.
production of, because it was still going, on. He gets here at that age. My grandparents, his parents,
Hmm.
come 6 to 7 years after in 67, 68.
Hmm.
So they had about 6 to 7 years of difficulty. They took their place, relocated them. They put them to work in the fields. My grandfather, just all sorts of stuff. But they had a 6 year of that crap,
Hmm.
and then they came over. My father brought them over, and they continued with the progress of the era.
Hmm.
So they did have a 6 year hold of
Hmm.
progress, of the normal progress of the world. But if you flip it, or if you turn that scope to my uncle, my
Hmm.
grandmother's brother, he came here in the 80s
Hmm.
after he had retired and all that. He spent 20 to 30 years
Hmm.
in a situation that stood still in time in terms of technology and this and that.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, he came, "Oh, your uncle's coming." I had never met him, but there he was. And he kind of looked like my grandfather, the skinny,
Hmm.
balding, just the same look. My granduncle Ramon.
Hmm.
But since he had lived his whole life, because he was an older generation, in a capitalistic system, he picked up right where he left off 30 years ago, and it wasn't that shocking, or at least it wasn't apparent to me. But for people that like that Joel guy,
Hmm.
they never knew.
That's all he's ever known. Yeah.
It's shocking.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Jim Dockrell says, when my mom came to Canada in 1945, she was amazed at the amount of food available. Where did she come from, Jim? Just out of
England.
curiosity.
I think it's England that she came from.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, right at the end of the war. So rationing was, there was still rationing over in UK. It did rationing of food and some what we would consider staples didn't end in some cases until about the mid 1950s. Because like I know the sugar rationing ended in the UK in like 1952. So
My granduncle Gregorio Escajedo,
mhm,
which owned various sugar
mhm.
um, processing plants,
Plantation, yeah, okay.
sent over to Scotland,
Mhm.
so that schools, the kids could take home to their families. So
Yeah.
he sent to Scotland specifically. That's the only one I've found.
Mhm.
I guess they were. I don't know. It was just that.
Mhm.
It was a cool thing to run into.
Yeah, yeah, it is cool. Okay, Birmingham, England. Yeah, yeah. Rationing was still, yeah, rations. Rationing was still very much um, a thing during that time, 1945. Because you got to remember, everything had to be transported by ship, and there were only so many ships could get through. Even after the war, there were only so many ships that could come. And trying to catch up on 10 years, I mean, because World War II actually started in 1938. Um, Europe 1939, but so you had that, what's that, 6 years of nothing getting through or close to nothing getting through. So, yeah, with that many mouths to feed, trying to get everything out to where the public at large could get a hold of it. Yeah. I mean, geez, that's something. I mean,
Pretty crazy.
it's hard to I mean, we panic if there's a run on toilet paper and suddenly, oh no, we're down to our last roll. Well, I mean, imagine not having it for 5 or 6 years.
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, yard squirrels and such would be a little bit more affected than.
Well, good old soap and water, my friend. But okay, let's see. She came over on the Queen Mary as a war bride, married a Canadian in England. Ah, okay, okay, okay. I heard somebody, I don't remember who it was, talking about this was through somebody else. Guy was from Romania and brought his mother over, basically got her out and brought her to America. And he was driving a taxi and he took her to a grocery store and she was just absolutely fascinated and at the variety of everything. And she kind of took off, wandered off on her own. And he found her like 3 aisles over from where she wandered away from him, just on her knees crying. And he was like, Mama, what happened? What happened? Did you fall? What happened? What happened? And she could only say, they lied. All my life, they lied to us. They told us that we were rich and that Americans were poor. You're only a driver. You're just a menial worker and you have access to all of this. I can't believe how they lied to us. She'd been lied to her entire life by a totalitarian government.
Imagine. Let me use
So,
that as a foot, up. Imagine being a country, an island country like Cuba,
mhm.
throughout the 20th century, the first half, where the dollar and the Cuban peso were par and par. When Fords and other cars came out in the United States, many times they came out in Cuba first.
Mhm.
Parallel, but sometimes there were like these little moments where things.
Well,
And
it was a smaller market, so it was easier to ship and fill the market. Yeah.
well, no, you had rich Americans,
Yeah.
in the society. Imagine an island nation that was basically a capitalistic nation, and then using this scenario, and then because of the petulance, and maybe in many cases rightly so in specific instances, but because of a certain idea of a certain type of let's say equality for all at the expense of, well, we'll figure that part out later. um all those people
Mhm.
from the first half of the
Yeah.
20th century, all of them either stayed and their children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren are now living in squalor,
Mhm.
or they became the tyrants that run the
Yeah.
place and can have the items,
Yeah. They
or
became part of the system. Yeah.
fled,
Mhm.
which is our case, where my
Well,
parents.
and you get into a situation like Romania, you're basically a part of the Soviet Union. There was no fleeing.
On the whim, mind you, of, oh, we've got this locked down.
Mhm.
Radical changes to the system when people are going, yes, that there's always there's even in the United States there's terrible injustice, but the level, the what do you
Mhm.
call it, the gradient of where from bad to the best exists. Most people live inside that gradient, and
Mhm.
at the bottom end of that gradient of, man, things are crappy. It's Yes, in some cases, but in a general sense, it's an easier slide. Whereas over there, everybody's screwed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the way it is in totalitarian systems.
So it's like so no. But I guess the point is that for a person that's never had, so like things like here that we take I guess we take for granted, for even
Yeah.
if we don't, we
Mm-hmm.
still do. Because look at me, I bitched a storm because the light flickered for even less than a millisecond. I mean, it went, but that millisecond was enough to turn off my internet, which pissed me off
Mm-hmm.
because I've got something to do here.
Yeah.
I shouldn't. Well, I'm not going crazy over it, but the point is, that's a reminder of be thankful.
Yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yeah. And sometimes it comes from the weirdest things. Like watching that channel, Yolan Murray, they went to I don't remember what store it was, Bass Pro Shop or something like that. And he walked up and he's looking at this just one rack of fishing poles. And he says, "That's for fishing, right?" She says, "Yeah." And he says, "These are illegal in Cuba."
Oh yeah.
And that is something that I never would have even considered. I'm thinking it's an island out in the ocean, fishermen all over the place. No, that's illegal.
Yeah.
You can't go. You're on an island in the middle of the ocean and you are forbidden from fishing. Are you kidding me?
Certain animals you can't have.
Well,
Butcher, even to butcher.
yeah, I'd heard about that. And I kind of expected that because there is still some of that in little pockets of Europe where there are certain things you just can't get your hands on, but you go 30 miles that way, you can,
No,
you
no,
know.
like they.
But
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
but
like it's illegal for them to have certain things.
right, right. But fish on an island? Are you kidding me? I would have thought that would have been one of their staple foods for the coastal areas. I mean, it's kind of hard to do if you're 100 miles inland.
Yeah.
Man.
What it is that they screwed up. They
Yeah.
screwed up.
Now, um, Jim Dockrell says Cuba was a hotspot for the rich before Castro, and it in some ways it still is because well, I know in Canada, if you want to take a flight to Havana, you can. You got to have money because it ain't cheap, but you can do it. But that could be a tropical paradise. It really could be if they
All
were
the
allowed to
Cubans,
be.
all the Cubans. So Cubans are so. It's kind of pretentious to say, but I've been around it all my life, and I don't consider myself
Yeah.
Cuban.
Okay.
Which I've mentioned to you many a time.
Yeah, we talked about it a lot.
And so it's what I'm going to say. I guess it's going to be a difficult thing to say because it's going to sound slightly pretentious, but I'm not going at it in that with that
Yeah, I
angle,
get
but it's
it.
going to sound that way. And again, I don't think of myself as Cuban as if it's something. However, in terms of nationality, I'm saying
You,
there's heritage there and stuff,
yeah, you're proud of your roots, but I get it.
but I just consider myself the place where I'm from.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's the most reasonable, rational understanding of things and stuff. And I mean, frankly, but whatever. So I'm trying to make a separation there for what I'm about to say.
Okay.
Um, if so, when Cubans left, well, prior to that, what Cubans were was a plethora of different things, but they
Sure.
were of Spanish descent from many places in Spain, of African descent
Mm-hmm.
from long time ago, slave trade era,
Mm-hmm.
minimal pockets of Chinese and Jewish and Lebanese and British, Irish people that coalesced into this thing to one degree or the other. These people would set up shop and they did capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
They just basically did capitalism and they had the life that they had. But there was ups and downs because it depended. If you, there could be very very poor people, but it was the era and other places that were similar um, had very much poverty on the extreme ends as well,
Mhm.
and they didn't fall into communism. They dealt with it and eventually came out of it. But these people during the middle half of the 20th century, with the students and other people complicit,
Mhm.
were became radical with an idea that
Mhm.
started out there in Europe and certain places,
Mother
and they
Russia.
just decided to we need a radical change around here, um, and they screwed it for they screwed it for them, their kids, their grandkids. They screwed it for families, the whole thing. Well, the Cubans that came over here continued with the tradition of capitalistic ideas.
Mhm.
And, well, hell, it's a smorgasbord of capitalistic endeavors here. Some things are less palatable for me than others, but in the scheme of things, Miami, the greater Miami area, is an example of, I mean, it just rows and rows of. So, what I'm getting at, I'm sure that if that system wasn't in place and they had the
Oh
opportunity,
yeah.
the attitudes that these people have, because
Oh
what
yeah.
these people are, and I'm including myself as a derivative of that in my specific, is, well, they have a certain temperament.
Mhm.
They're not there. They
No,
have a
get the
temper.
hell out of my way and let me do what I got to do.
Right. There's a certain temperament with these people. However, regardless of that, if you put anybody, look at the people in Eastern Europe. If you put anybody in a situation and you give it enough time, they lose all hope.
Yeah.
It's a horrible, horrible thing. So, anyways, the
Yeah.
point was that they have a temperament that's suited for capitalistic enterprise, and so that I didn't want to sound like, as a, but and I'm sure that within a decade they could have things up and running like nobody's business, with hiccups, but
Well, if people will get out of the way and let them do it, yeah.
but that's not the case because you have people that are basically
Well,
monsters that control.
we saw a microcosm of that when the Berlin Wall came down over in Germany.
You were
Fourth of
telling
July,
me.
4th of July weekend, 1990. It was either 1990 or 1991. We drove into the former East Germany, Soviet satellite state, and just drove off the map. The map ended like maybe 2 kilometers, so a little over a mile over the border. And we just drove off the map just to see what there was to see. I had driven border tours for the uh, uh, for the army. I drove bus, so I had seen it through a fence, across a minefield, and through a fence with East German guards with Russian officers overseeing them, patrolling and watching our every move. Because the border fence, was about, I'd say 100 yards inside East Germany. So there was a series of stones there was no fence or no marker around it. You just had to watch for that series of stones. That was the actual border. And if you crossed that border, it was an international border incident. It was an illegal border crossing. And the East Germans were within their rights to grab your butt and take you in, try you, whatever. So you had to be careful. And no, I never drove my bus across that line. I wouldn't do it. Uh, okay, Linda says 1991, I think. We left in January of 92. Yeah, I think so. These were people who were taken, were total control, planned economy, totalitarian government, just disappeared overnight. It was just gone. They didn't know what to do. They had never been They had never lived, many of them had never lived in a capitalist country. They had never lived in a free and open society where you could go wherever you wanted to go. You could say what you wanted to say and do what you wanted to do. The Germanies hadn't officially reunited yet, but there really wasn't an East German government anymore. So for a few months, it was almost like a
Waiting
not so
station.
much. Yeah, it was. They were kind of in limbo. It wasn't anarchy by any sense of the word, um, but people really didn't know what to do. They all of a sudden freedom was thrust on them, and they didn't know how to handle it. They knew they didn't like the old way. They knew they didn't like total control, totalitarian government, but they didn't know what to do with their freedom, and a lot of them couldn't handle it. But it was, and there's still a little bit of that in the older generation, my generation, and the one before me. There's still a little bit of that, but more and more people are, and the younger people, they're used to it. I mean, they were born after that, but there's still a little bit of a hesitancy there. And do we really believe this? Do we really believe that we are free to do more or less what we want to do? And there are some people who don't like it. They want to go back to the old ways because they didn't have to think. The thinking was done for them. I can't even wrap my head around that kind of a mindset where all the thinking is done for you. You are basically a drone. You get up, you go to this factory, you work until that time, then you go home. You know, you can have this food. You can't go into that store. You get on a waiting list to own a car if you need one, and you're going to explain to us why you need a car. You're going to explain to us why you need a telephone. And if we don't think you need one, you just don't get one. So it was strange as an outsider looking in. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But I have to think that it was just as strange for them not being able to wrap their head around me wanting to go see their city, because they didn't see anything special about it. But I saw a lot special about it. I mean, we got stuck in a cow pasture, had to turn around and go back because the main road just ended. It just ended. I mean, we're talking about a main road. Suddenly it's dirt, and there are cows over there looking at the car. And I'm like, we didn't pass a fence. We didn't go through a gate. We didn't do nothing. It's just all of a sudden there's grass at knee high. Well, let me back up and turn around, and we'll
Yeah,
go find another road.
there's something to be said about human dignity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people don't, I don't think that many Americans, and I'm picking on Americans, but you could go across the board. Since we have plenty,
Mm-hmm.
that other thing doesn't look
Mm-hmm.
like even a possibility. But there's people
Mm-hmm.
that day to day have little prospect, and so you know,
Yeah.
and one can fool themselves. Like I'll say this: I saw a debate. Um, I'll link this um, to what I'm talking about, where they were debating something on religion. Is religion better for society as opposed to not, or whatever, something like that? You can't ask a question like that because there's too many variables.
Sure.
But I got a kick out of listening to these people arguing it, because I was thinking the whole time, who do these people think they are as an individual to think that what they think in terms of what's best for society, as if millions of people,
Yeah.
what their idea is going to suit millions of people in the United States, as an example, with
Mm-hmm.
all the different unique needs, desires, situations that each individual American may or may not have.
Mm-hmm.
for one guy to say, "Well, I know how this should go,"
Yeah.
is a bit rich.
Yeah, it really. Come on over here and tell me where I screwed up in my front yard. And while
Now,
you're at it, take an inventory of my stuff and tell me what you think you deserve. You know.
right. So when we're all young and we're all well, we were all young. Let me
Yeah.
restrict
Young
that.
and idealistic. Yeah.
Right, and so we would be rash in certain
Hmm.
assumptions, and we're still rash. Or I'm going to speak for myself.
Hmm.
Um, I have to pull myself back all the time. Well, first of all, sometimes I allow the steam to release so I can get out my idea or whatnot. But I know that I have to reel it in because just as soon as you go down a path,
Hmm.
there's 10 to 15 to 20 or endless other things that you've not accounted for in said
Oh yeah.
whatever. If one is looking for an accurate or as best accurate as you can get, considering all the different variables in a situation that you're dealing with or you're thinking over, if honesty to approach the truth of a matter, you have to conclude that what I think is best for other people is simply not true. It could be true if you're lucky, like winning the lottery in some cases with some people, but even then, it doesn't give me the right to condition the other people or to force the other people to do as I say.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of this autonomy thing where people can make the dumb decisions that they so choose.
Yes, absolutely. You are free to make all the stupid decisions in the world as long as you're not harming somebody else.
Right.
You know, you want to cut your big toe off, it's your big toe and it's your knife. I don't think it's a smart thing to do, but it's none of my business.
I
And
mean,
to
you
me,
could
that's the
consult.
big thing. To me, that's the big thing right there. It's none of my business. It's none of my business how any of my neighbors run their lives, you know?
It
And
really isn't.
I'm going to go against something you just said because I'm going to say I think what would be best for society is just everybody shut up and mind their own business.
I disagree with that. I disagree with minder. Okay, I guess
Obviously, if you see somebody about ready to be knifed, you got to say something. You got to do something or say something.
well, I'm not saying. Okay, so what I'm getting at is that I agree. Well, okay. The only sure thing that I'm comfortable with is
Mhm.
that my freedom to go hog wild ends at your doorstep.
Right.
But the mind your own business, and I agree with that in generally speaking. But I
Mhm.
also agree with the back and forth that people have in terms of the arguments or admonitions and the all the trash that one could consider banter or
If
noise because it also acts like
if
maybe like
if if in a debate setting, yes. In context, yes. If you want to have a discussion with somebody about that kind of thing, I'm 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 all for it. But if you're standing in front of me in the meat aisle screaming at me that I need to be vegan because it's better for the world, get out of my way. I don't have time for you.
how about throwing red paint on the Mona Lisa?
You know, I mean, well, I've said it many times before. That's how you close eyes, close ears, and condemn your cause.
Or how about those people that sat in the middle of the road while there's a line?
I don't want to
Remember it
get.
out in the desert? Out in the desert?
Yeah. Did you see what they kind of made a big mistake
Yeah,
because they did that on the Paiute reservation,
they screwed that
and
one up now, didn't they?
tribal police don't mess around. They don't play. They drove their truck through the barricade. then stopped, did a U-turn, came back, threw them all on the ground, cuffed them, and took them to the tribal police station. They don't play. They don't stand there with their little riot shields. They come in swinging. They don't play.
These people, I don't know one way or the other, but it's just like any other thing. If you're going to, well, you could do any, you could protest as part of the deal, but so there's a few complications with it. But if you're gonna, why don't you go to the lavish mansions of the politicians or the congressional and whatnot, just like they did in January 6th without creating the battle?
Because they're tools.
Exactly, because you go to point to the power, but regular people. I mean,
They, they
I,
want they want to reserve the right to run their own lives while attempting to obtain the right to run yours.
oh yeah, dude, it's total bull.
And Jim
They're total bull.
Dockrell's got it. 2 rules of business. 1, mind your own. 2, stay out of mine. If you want to put sour cream on your French fries and ketchup on your baked potato, I say go for it. But when you throw that potato in my yard, you've crossed the line.
But these people, because the problem with humans too is that humans come in different varieties.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking about up here in the brain, what they've learned, what they believe, and what they accept. And there's a certain group that leans towards this, to be fair and nice. They see the disparities in the traditional things that we talk about, like stuff like that, like the environment and other things, and they're young and so on, and so that's to be nice. To be not nice, like you said, there are a bunch of tools. They haven't developed their thinking power, or maybe they don't care, or maybe they're not capable of such. And again, people are, who's to say, like, let's say one guy wants to be a musician, the other guy wants to be a baker, the other lady wants to be an architect, the other one this and that, but that's different than blocking the ability for people to get to and fro in any type of emergency, family, whatnot, or what, because you think your dumbass is going to change the face of the world. Meanwhile, the people that probably fund you without you knowing or even knowing are living on the coast in lavish mansions with two smokestacks sticking out of their tennis.
They have a right to protest, but what they don't have a right to do is demand anything. You're in no position to demand anything of anybody.
Well, there are no.
They have a right to peaceably assemble.
No, they can demand. They just can't enforce their demand. They can demand all they want.
Oh, they can say what they want. Yes, you're right. They go, I demand this. I demand that.
Yeah, good for you.
But see, we've been conditioned, and we're conditioning a couple of generations here to believe that, number one, their opinion matters to the public at large, and that they have a right to be listened to. No, you don't have a right to be listened to. You have a right to speak, but everybody else has the right to just walk past you and ignore you. You don't have the right to demand to be heard or listened to. You don't have that right. And you ding dong sure don't have the right to block somebody else's free movement in this country. And they're getting a lot of pushback, and not in nice ways. Let's think about this just 100% from a safety standpoint. Everybody wants to talk about safety nowadays. Let's think about this just from a safety standpoint. There are a lot of unhinged people out there. And you've heard the phrase, when you've got nothing to lose. There are some unhinged individuals out there that wouldn't think twice about running somebody over.
Oh, yeah. No, wait a second. That is true. But when you were saying unhinged, I was thinking about those very. Here's the problem. Yes, that's very true. There's somebody out on the road, and if you're blocking because you have some sort of passion about the woolwack lily that
Mhm.
grows on the side of the highway, whatever, and you're making all the huff and puff. There are a truck driver that's going to say, you know what, this guy's cream. But there's also those people that are doing all this stuff, creating a to do that they don't believe it. They're
Well, what?
pandering to this ego thing, and I don't know that. Like I can't point. I'm saying a general sense of the thing.
Yeah, you're
I don't
right.
know because if you ever press these people, and I have some, if you press these people, they go in circles and they never touch the moral.
Well, because they know the talking points. That's all, and that's all they know.
Right. And so there's nothing wrong. Oh, I want to save the sea urchin splatter dock goofy turtle.
Mhm.
Um I okay, but
Well,
you don't get to
so do we, but this doesn't accomplish it.
right. And if you find that turtle, let me know because
You really.
wherever that turtle's at, that's $1 million turtle
Yeah,
right there. I'll say,
Shellus ludicrous osidorus. Yeah.
I mean, but then again, there's enough for everybody in terms of ways
Yeah.
of thinking and ideas and stuff. But here's the thing: um, these people that want to we need push in society, but um, it goes both ways because
Yeah.
people get sick of stupid crap and they're going to push back too in the ways that they do.
Hmm.
And so we're doing what society does, which is that's stupid, no that's okay, that's acceptable, no this is stupid. So we're doing, so that's the game, I get it. But um
What they don't get is they're the punchline to a joke they don't understand. Because
we
all they've done is they've condemned their cause by doing this little thing. So I can only conclude, and this is my cynical mind at work, I can only conclude that it's a cry for attention. Because if they have a goal, if they have something they want to accomplish, they're failing and they're condemning that cause and turning people against it. There's a video on YouTube right now, these just stop oil protesters that sit out there and block the roads like we're talking about.
yeah,
They were having this big dinner banquet in somewhere in the UK. I want to say it was in London, but it may have been outside of London. And a couple of anti-protesters somehow got into that venue. They were having this big award thing, and it's a big, huge, old, I don't know when it was built, 13, 1400, something like that. Huge building, big hall. Ceilings were like 25 feet tall, something like that. They walked in with a have you ever accidentally pushed the emergency fire exit door open in a store and heard that wee 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 wee
yeah,
alarm? They got like 5 or 6 of those, tied them to helium balloons and released them and just turned them on. And they had to stop their dinner and just everybody leave the venue because they couldn't get them down. They tied them to helium balloons and they went up into the roof. And just like 5 or 6 of these damn things, they just stopped their little dinner and celebration banquet. And it was over before it actually ever started.
there are 40, 50, 60, 70-year old grown men and women
Mm-hmm.
that a century shy have not been able to collate certain boundary relations between topics and you know action reaction and limitations of rights and my rights, just a whole litany of things that I grew up with. And see, here's the thing, I grew up with it, so I wouldn't know anything else. It sounds reasonable to me, but it's kind of what the idea has, the idea of you don't trespass on your neighbor.
No.
all these things. There's people that throw all of that, and they're willing to lie, cheat, and
Mhm.
bend every rule in order to,
Well, it's all
as
about me.
grown people,
It's all
and
about me.
they're not and they're not willing or never even consider. And here's the thing: to address or to review. Well, okay, I believe this. And why do I believe that? Let me see. I believe that. Well, I believe that because of this and this. But what are those other people? They're saying this and that. And it's kind of like this. I was on a little travel, and I let you know along the way a few months back, maybe last year or something, where I ran into some people from the Black Hebrew something or other,
Yeah.
and and I consumed a lot of their material to see what they were saying, because saying, no, look, this and that. Now we can't go down every rabbit hole, but I wanted to see what they were, and so I went through that thing, and I even contacted you. I said, dude,
Mhm.
Mark, can you believe they're saying that everybody in Europe was black? um and what, and you said, well, what about you know the white people? And I said, well, they're saying that they were in their caves, and like that. But here's the thing, they have a method to create this whole reality for
Mhm.
themselves. There are some legitimate little tidbits within their thing, but they want to blanket the world with, they know every single
Yeah.
detail of their belief system, of their this, of their, and so
And
what ends up happening, and I'm likening that to these um environmental thing. um you have to, there's got to be a, I mean,
well,
we're human beings, we're
you
working
know,
with it, I
I
mean.
th- I think we can all agree don't pee in the pool. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah,
But that
I can
doesn't
agree,
mean you have to stay out of the water.
but I
That
don't
does
agree with
that doesn't mean you can't look at the pool. That doesn't mean you can't admire it and take pictures of it. You know?
Marla. Is that a floating? Oh, I'm not gonna say what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean,
Dun 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 dun. I'm
yeah.
not gonna.
Caddyshack. I'm all right. See how the mind goes?
I thought you.
The train is just derailed. My train of thought, it was left standing in the station. It's just
They
gone.
only said you couldn't pee in the pool.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Let me try to bring my brain back. Jim Dockrell, my neighbor felt compelled to mow her lawn today because I mowed mine. I told her, don't worry, my concern over the way the yard looks ends at my property line. Well, yeah, as it should. Now, you can have an opinion. Damn, her lawn looks like trash. But it's just that. It's only your opinion, you know? So
I,
Frankie says, I've wanted to pee in a few people's pools in the past. Frankie, there's a very subtle but very profound difference between peeing in the pool and peeing into the pool. Okay. Just putting it out there. Okay.
and then there's another one, peeing into the pool from the sitting in a deck chair.
Yeah. From the high dive. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You know, just just putting it out there so save you a little bit of trouble.
Watching a little, with the sun shining, watching a little rainbow form as the
Yeah,
stream.
exactly. You know, when you're a 3-year-old and you wet the bed, that's one thing. If you're doing it from the hallway, that's another thing. So, you know,
I mean, the problem is that there's a lot of people with different focus or oblivious to certain things, and then you have different upbringing styles, and
well, that's what I mean.
it's like a maze of layers of mazes. And if if two little signals don't run parallel, you're going to have conflict with certain ideas and
Uh
whatnot.
oh. Uh oh. We got to clean it up.
What happened?
Um, uh, Dawn, the yarn doll, said, what if I could? John Cousins sent me. Been watching, just couldn't chat. Okay. Yeah. We got John
Well, we're
Cousins.
talking about pools.
John Cousins sending his viewers over. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, we are 100% unscripted. Don't be surprised at anything you hear. We try to stay family friendly, and sometimes we achieve it.
Actually,
So
we wrote a whole itinerary just on peeing in pools, and we reviewed it and proofed it back and forth for like 2 weeks or so, and that's what we're doing now. Could you imagine?
but but again, like I was saying earlier, we've been conditioned to believe that our opinion matters to the public at large, and therefore we have to get it out there 100%, and we have the right to be heard, and it just isn't the case. Your opinion is your opinion. Great, terrific, but that's all it is your opinion, and it just probably doesn't matter to most folks.
Well, I'll go a little bit slightly nuanced in it because that's a good topic. Um, I'll use an example. Well, hell, okay. So if someone is a professional in a specific category and they write out a whole thing explaining a specific thing about, I don't know, whatever, some sort of engineering
Uh-huh.
apparatus, and this is how this works and whatnot. And other professionals read it, and this and 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 there's a enthusiast community online. Um, and you can liken this to the DNA thing. You can liken this to
Mm-hmm.
music,
Mm-hmm.
to arts and crafts and woodworking and any other number of things. Um,
Right.
and there's an enthusiast community, and they run across this paper that this guy, and he's explaining how this mechanism works and whatnot. And they start reviewing it, and they're like, "Well, wait a second, look at this. Now these people are amateurs, but they're finding things that, at least to their mind, you have this dialogue occur, and they might put out their papers and stuff, and you'll have it, but that's different."
Yes.
And what I'm getting at is, if you have a, if you give the topic enough dignity, respect for yourself and for the topic, or for the idea that you're putting out, and you're wanting to contribute, your piece, and maybe you're not the polished whatnot, maybe you're not a polished musician, but you do this rendition of God Save the Queen, or
Mm-hmm.
you, whatever the case. Um, there's dialogue to be had there.
Sure.
That's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is to have people, out of spite, out of just some sort of grudge or pettiness, and they're allowed to do it too. However, what's going to come out of these people is basically what they're putting out, which is this lack of wanting to engage in the thing. I'll give a final example. There's a professor called Professor David Reich
Mm-hmm.
from Harvard University, and he's a geneticist, and he's done a lot of great studies and put out papers and whatnot. And there's a podcast where he explains that there's an amateur community out there
Mm-hmm.
that once he puts out the data, his team and whatnot, that data he puts out is for the world, and that's
Yeah.
how it works with genetics.
Yeah.
They put it out for everyone, so everybody
That's how
has
they
that.
do. That's how it's done with most science. Yeah.
Well, there's a community of people that grab on to the papers
Mm-hmm.
and start to
Dissect
crush, dissect it, and they're amateurs.
it. Mm-hmm.
And he mentions in this podcast some of these amateurs have alternate what's the word
Senses of reality.
no like purposes,
Mm-hmm. Ulterior motives.
ulterior motives. And what they're doing is, and he mentions it in the podcast, is that they're looking for race specific differences in order to solidify
Mm-hmm.
a concept of preserving one race as opposed to others, which doesn't hold water according to the data, and he explains
Mm-hmm.
it in the thing. But these people are on about that.
Mm-hmm.
But in so doing that, um, they're putting out papers, and then there's a battle happening and whatnot. So they have some of these have ulterior
Sure.
motives, and others contradict them and shut their ass down, and so on. So what I'm getting at is that dialogue. This is people throwing paint on the Mona Lisa falls way shy of a sincere thing, but
Debate, yes.
there is space to have dialogue.
But there's always space to have dialogue. Let's take your first example of engineering and talking about this on forums where even amateur engineers can get in there and say, wait a minute, what about the tensile strength of this bolt versus this bolt? Or how about a weld joint or this, that? But context, you are going to a place where that type of dialogue is expected. They're not standing on the sidewalk in front of your house with a bullhorn screaming it to the public at large.
Mhm.
That's what I mean about having an opinion, and it's vitally important that the world listen to your opinion. It just isn't. If you want to have a discussion about vitamin D on a medical forum, that kind of discussion is expected there, and more often than not welcome there, because that's what that forum is for. It's for the free and open exchange of ideas in that context. That's a completely different situation. But when you are imposing your opinion on somebody else without any form of authority to do so, you've crossed that line. You can think that nobody should be able to own a table saw unless they have been officially, formally trained on its operation. You can have that opinion, but you don't have the right to force me to conform to that opinion. And you don't have the right to demand I listen to your opinion. You can say what you want, you can think what you want, but you can't do what you want when it affects somebody else. That's my whole point on this.
That's the golden rule in terms of what we understand, and this is a known quantity. Most people follow that in everyday life, except in certain situations when they want to force upon you, like
Exactly.
what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we're always going to have people like that. These people can protest.
They can peaceably assemble, yes.
You know, I think protesting is also I mean, protesting doesn't mean
We
throwing paint
we
on the Mona
we
Lisa.
say protest, but nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say you have the right to protest. It says you have a right to peaceably assemble and air your grievances, but it doesn't say you have a right to protest.
Well, I mean, but it falls under freedom of speech too, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
you can call it whatever you want.
Yeah, yeah. But
The the
my
the, the
but my right to swing my fist ends at your nose. So you can say what you want, but but you don't have a right to be listened to or heard.
yeah,
That's
you
all I'm
can't
getting at.
force people to
Exactly.
conform to whatever it is that you and we have
Exactly.
it that way, or the tradition is that way because it maximizes, I guess, the most amount of individual, autonomy.
Yeah. And Jim makes a good point here. People don't want to hear your opinion. They want to hear their opinion coming from your mouth. You know, it's if you say the right things, you
But
can
it
say
depends.
anything you want.
But it depends on it depends on the topic. So
Yeah,
it depends
you're right about
because
that because we can get into contextual discussions about that as well.
sometimes you want to hear the opposite. Sometimes you want to hear a variation on what you're putting out in order to re-examine. The most honest. It depends on the context, like you're saying.
Mhm.
Um, but politics. is not that way. So
Mm-mm.
like, and since we're
And it
kind of,
never will be. And it never will be. Just the nature of the beast.
yeah, that's the problem. That with politics is a, I'm right, you're wrong, end the story,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of times it comes down to personality and or the person. So
Well, there's a whole litany of,
because it doesn't matter what the message is. But
oh,
and that's why I don't partake.
there's certain ideologies that I would never
Mm-hmm.
accept in terms
Oh, sure.
of a reasonable thing that others might think is completely reasonable,
Mm-hmm.
simply because I have a certain history
Mm-hmm.
that has informed me,
Sure.
and I don't feel like it. I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think it's worth
Sure.
the risk. I don't think a bunch of things. But for another person, those same set of ideas might be the most, to them, brilliant thing. However, the missing key here is
Mm-hmm.
put your foot in the other people's slippers, walk a mile, and sort of gauge, when, especially when it's something that's so society changing as, hey, let's change our whole political system or some crazy thing like that.
Yeah.
If it's little things like, maybe today is Taco Bell and tomorrow we're gonna have Hardee's, that, okay, fine, you're radical, man, you're radical. But in situations where it's like you're restructuring a whole civilization
These
because you
people
feel,
these people haven't even got their own lives figured out, but they've got mine figured out for me too. Really? Really? Dude, you're 25 years old. I've got shoes older than you. And you've got life figured out. Really?
plus we have the smartest minds in America working on it every night and day.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. That's my cynicism coming out because I think you can only know what's best for you. You might have an opinion on what's best for your next door neighbor, but it's only that. It's your opinion. And at the end of the day, it's none of your business. If he wants to paint his bedroom flat black out of a Krylon spray can, it's none of your damn business. Now, you can disagree with that and go, oh my God, that's a gloomy looking place, but it's none of your business.
You know, I have, this is an aside, but it kind of works in the issue of putting something. I have a few topics that I've honed in on that I could make some cool videos, that I'd like to make some cool videos on, that happens to do with populations and this and that, but in a very specific way, that's very crystal clear, with documentations and stuff. Like, it's something that, oh man, I would like to do that, and I've not done specifically the things that I'm thinking, because judging by other videos that I've gone through on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
and the litany of ignorance that I've read,
Yeah.
or um, lack of what's the word, like
Thought.
like this like the curiosity to say, oh wait, what you just said, wait a second, let me think here, lack of that sort of thing,
Intellectual honesty.
or even, yeah, just the even the caring, or even the inspiration to even say, wait a second, okay, wait, so you're saying that X, Y, and Z, huh, let me review at least X and Y,
But
because
you
maybe
may
it's,
get one or two of those, but those aren't your typical keyboard warriors.
no, okay, so to wrap it up, the majority of people, at least that you visually see, it's just a huge ocean or river of, and by the way, I'm no better, because in the ways that I am ignorant, I'm above and beyond ignorant. But me observing that, in other words, I'm not saying, oh, those people and me, I'm just saying, watching that, to go to a certain level of intricate with a video, especially when it has to do with things that are a little bit sensitive and this and that, I think to
Yeah.
myself, what's the damn point? Because the points, whatever points one makes, are going to be crapped out the exit hole anyhow.
Oh yeah.
They're not going to even allow for the, and so, but there's some cool thing. And then I think to myself, well, it doesn't matter what reception or not reception. It's not like, I have a million followers, but it's like, why bother?
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
You've got a point there.
Plus, there's plenty of information, but like, okay, I'll be transparent. There's a specific thing that really rubs me wrong, and not that I'm partial to any particular group or this or that in terms of
Mhm.
in this category, but like, there's this book called The Bell Curve, which we've talked about,
Yeah.
and there's a ton of videos out there with very prominent people, and you'll have supporters of that book come on these shows, and these supposed intellectual people that run the shows, the hard hitting questions don't come. They accept every premise because
Every
it's
little,
written in the book.
every
And
little softball thing. Yeah.
yeah, and I see that, I'm like, and everybody accepts, not everybody, but a truckload of people accept certain concepts. Um, and by the way, it's not like one is, any, but there's some very clear points that disrupt the concept of the bell curve when it comes to a certain group of people, um, that they're obviously trying to target as less than, let's say.
Well,
And I find it, and it's not like I have a preference in terms of what, but I do have a preference for that's bull crap.
hmm yeah. Well, it's because they have a preconceived notion and they have a prefixed agenda in their brain, and they're grasping at anything that will help them try to prove that point.
And they'll be intricate in their explanations.
Well, it's because they've got it all thought out. And now here's this intellectual over here that said something that could be bent, misconstrued, or even taken verbatim that will support my preconceived notion. And we have a word for those people. They're called bigots.
Oh yeah, they're bigots, and so that's another thing, because, and by the way, they have that aspect to them. They are human beings. Um,
Most of them.
well, okay, so when we see something we don't like in people, maybe it's an idea, thread, or that it's incorrect. We don't like it because it's incorrect, or we don't like it because it's distasteful, or whatever. We also have, in a general sense, as human beings, it's not like, hey, I'm the good guy in a general sense, and those are the bad guys. Although you could make that argument, well, they
Sure.
believe that, and that's kind of bigoted and whatnot. It's not that I'm the good. No, we're all, this is my opinion. I think it's we're all bad in ways. We're all good in ways. But there's certain ways that people are bad that one, it's difficult to stomach, and there's certain ways that people are good people are good, and so, and so at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is that with an ocean of ignorance, and then when realizing, well, there's a truckload of ignorance for me to deal with, and they're not, these people are just, what it is, what it is. They don't have the curiosity. They don't want that. They have their bigotry. Let's say it's like swimming up the river against the current. Why bother? And then I think to myself, well, you could put your thing out because this is what you think according to the things you've gathered. And it's your fulfillment of a little concept video and whatnot. And I do stuff like that, but not how I'm thinking of what I'd want to do. But it's not it almost feels like, it's not worth it. Because
Well, the way I fight that kind of thing is I don't partake. I don't give them the attention they're after. I don't purchase their stuff. I don't watch their videos. I don't listen to their speeches. I don't even entertain the thought of the giving them any of my attention. You know, I I owe them the same thing I owe each and every other person walking the face of the earth, and that is my complete and total indifference. If
Okay,
you have some idea about that kind of thing, that's your idea, that's your problem, and you're the person that has to live with it, not me. I am not going to waste my time on that person. That's all there is to it.
I'll sit through a whole
I,
Farrakhan speech.
I won't. I won't. He's not even going to get my view.
I'll sit through a whole Farrakhan speech, and the reason being, I want to hear what they have to say and be able to read, number one, the lines of what he's saying above water, and what the thread that he's taking people on, and what's appealing to people about that he's saying. There's obvious reasons of why it's appealing, or certain things are appealing of what certain people say, and then the gaps and problems that occur when they string an hour long sermon of a lot of bigotry done in a unique way in order to escape that notion, so that the audience doesn't connect that what they're doing is they're saying you people are bad to the bone, and all those other people, they're a bunch of scumbags. It's the same equivalent but done in a different way. The way he does it, it's the same equivalent that you'd have a KKK group do, but on the flip side.
Yeah.
um and you can argue that there's a lot of nuance there, but at the end of the day, there's this thing, and it's the same with everything. It could be even freaking like, you know, arguments over any topic. The idea is to see what they're building, how they're building it, word by word, and seeing where the bull crap is at. I don't always succeed, or most of the time I don't succeed, and I'm left thinking, what the heck is going on here? But the reason I do that is in order to check. I just do that. It's just because that's how I am. I do that um,
I
to
don't.
try to slip on those slippers and sort of and see what the story. I mean, there's so much of that.
I don't. And that's why there's so much of it. I think they're completely and totally irrelevant. Both sides of that coin. I think they're entitled to their opinion. They're entitled to preach to anybody that wants to listen to them. That's their thing. To me, they're completely and totally irrelevant. I don't care what he has to say. I don't care what his opinion is. I just I don't care. And it's not just specifically him. Most people, I don't care. I really honestly just don't care. I don't care what my local councilman has to say. It has no effect on the way I live my life. None. He can have an opinion about what books he thinks should be in the public library. Great, that's your opinion. But you're not the guy that puts those books there. I don't care. Your opinion on that subject doesn't matter. If I am concerned about what books are going into my public library, I'll attend the library meetings. I'll attend that and I'll talk to those people. I'll hear what they have to say. But some preacher anywhere with his opinion on what books need to be removed from the local library are irrelevant to me because they're not in a position to do anything about it. I do care what my city council says about the speed limit out here on the highway. I do care what my county council says about the zoning of my property and what my property taxes are going to be. I care about that greatly. So that's what I'm going to focus my attention on, not what some guy in, wherever, some guy in Washington thinks about the state of the forests in Oregon. His opinion doesn't matter. I'm going to listen to the people down here who's worried about the forests in the state of Oregon because we live in them. You know what I mean? I put my emphasis on people that absolutely or that directly affect me and very little on people that don't directly affect me. Now that's kind of an abstract and subjective thing because who's to say what's decided in New Orleans tomorrow won't affect me today? But there are people making decisions in Japan right now that may affect me tomorrow, that I'll never know and I'll never meet, just simply by virtue of them flying here, renting a car, and we have an accident. So there are some things that are within my control. There are some things that are out of my control. I do choose my forms of entertainment, but when I'm looking for entertainment, I'm looking for an escape from all this other stuff because I have too much other stuff to think about already. So when I'm looking for entertainment, I'm looking for something that'll put all those other thoughts on hold. And yeah, I want to watch the dog jump on the trampoline. Or yeah, I want to watch the cat chase the laser around the living room and try to go up the wall. You know, I want escapism from all the other junk, I guess, you know. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I mean, not everybody is the
no.
same,
Oh, sure.
and people have different focuses,
Mm-hmm.
or and even different reasons um for getting into something. So, I mean, it could be anything. I have my way in terms of that, which
Mm-hmm.
I laid out, and the idea is to explore. But it could be anything. It could be so. It could be like to take it somewhere simple, or disconnected from like heavy duty stuff. Just even like music, which I'm sure Steve is gonna like this one, but like stuff even like music. So as a musician, let's say, maybe one approaches the guitar in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
and due to one's bias or interest or any number of variables, one sticks to a specific genre, and you might end up as a bluegrass guy
Mm-hmm.
or gal that you're simply focused in that genre at the exclusion of all the others. You might be aware that yeah, there's other stuff there, but it interests me not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at the same time, you could have that that bluegrass person, and then you have another bluegrass person, and that other bluegrass person is not only a bluegrass person, but they also like to get in the skinny about the lives of these bluegrass artists. But this one guy doesn't. He's
Yeah.
just into doing them, and so you have all this variety of things. But
Sure.
we need okay, so we need. I mean, um, I think we need for people across the world, but across the country in this case, to be focused in whatever it is that they're focused in,
Right.
accomplishing or delving or fiddling about with the topics and issues and little nooks where they go. Um, and that's why and that's what people diversely
Mm-hmm.
focus on different things. I mean, I like the
I,
CNC. I don't
I,
own a
I
CNC, but I can appreciate it from afar. But I've not learned the computer program
mm-hmm.
for it. If I had a CNC in a space, then maybe I would have that
Mm-hmm.
ability to focus. And so it's not accessible to me. But what if I don't have the CNC? And I'm using this as a general
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
about CNC. What if I don't have the CNC? But on the flip side, I'm totally into the computer thing, and I want to know how that freaking program works and the abilities, even though I don't have the equipment at home. And so there's all these different things. So, you know,
Yeah, there are interests that run in every direction. And if you're interested in something and you're passionate about something, by all means, get into it. I'm not saying that at all. And I'm not saying to exclude yourself from other things, other thoughts, and other ideas. I can only speak for myself. I used to be an absolute news junkie. I mean, if I wasn't on C SPAN, I was on one of the news channels, talk radio 24/7. I was a news junkie and I had an opinion on everything, and I made damn sure that everybody around me knew it. So I've had that side. And I finally decided that yelling at the TV and walking around constantly pissed off at the world because they weren't doing it right wasn't fun anymore. I was not a pleasant person to be around. So it's just not me. We do need thinkers. We need the thinkers in the world to study this stuff and look at the empirical data and collate all this information and say, guys, this isn't working. Hey, guys, this is working. We did a good thing over here. We made a mistake over there. We need those people. We need the people, even the bluegrass musicians, to change from an F to a G. And let's rethink this. We're playing this in the wrong key. Let's try this key. We need those people to push those boundaries. All I'm saying is, it ain't me. I've tried, I've fought my battles. I won a few, I lost a few. But at the end of the day, I didn't like who I was while I was doing it. And it turns out most of the people around me didn't like it either. So I've I there comes a point where you get tired of banging your head against the wall, you know, and it doesn't hurt the wall any. It just keeps making you sorer and sorer and sorer, and pretty soon the people around you start walking away, going, "I don't know what his trip is, man." You know,
Oh, oh, oh,
and
oh, oh.
and that takes a little bit of introspection. And I was 50 years old when it happened, 51 years old when it happened, something like that. I finally had to look in the mirror and say, "Dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop and think about it. What are you doing?" And nobody likes to look in the mirror and tell that guy you're wrong. But sometimes you have to, and I had to. And I just decided that it wasn't worth alienating everybody I knew
Well, I mean,
to get my point
that's
across, you know?
that's fair. I mean, so I'll say it's been a while, but I ran into it recently. So I'll say they discovered maybe sometime in the '60s, somewhere in the 20th
Mhm.
century, in Tibet, in a monastery behind a wall.
Mhm.
They knocked down a wall and found hundreds of thousands. They say, and there's pictures too of scrolls, Tibetan scrolls,
Mhm.
of which not even a point of a percent has been actually looked through and translated.
Mhm.
And it scales up the sides of the walls of that, you know, inner sanctum.
Mhm.
I mean, like it goes up, 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 and it's just like, have you ever seen Indiana Jones where they have all the
Oh,
crates?
yeah, 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 yeah.
It's something like that,
Mhm.
and so there's people that are on about figuring that out.
Mhm.
And they will look, and then there's going to be the people that will consume that. I'm sure if that came out, I'm going to read a couple of those things to see what it says.
Sure.
Um, and it almost, it's almost like a farmer's almanac where you get a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
Mhm.
Um, I'm talking about my, the thing, but it's only in specific areas that I'm interested in, and we all do that
Sure.
for for any number of reasons, and I think that that's okay. Now, that's one thing. People going about their business, it may interest one, maybe not another. This and that, and some things have ramifications. Some things are vital, some things are not, and to each their own. Um, but going back to the beginning, that's one thing. And then imagine me showing up at the doorstep of the guy that interviewed the dude that was pro um, the bell curve, and hold a week long seance slash um, juggling protest fest in front of his frickin' lawn with picnic sandwiches. I mean, there's
Yeah, what are you gonna accomplish?
exactly just so. I disagree with and just like the same thing with this Farrakhan guy. I use it as an example, but
Mhm.
I will consume the material to see what they say. I disagree, and there's cleverness in there to be sure, um, and it's to me it's useful because I'm learning what the limits of so I've got my own thing. I
Sure.
just it's just my own thing, but am I gonna go and hold a week long topless protest with a pink hat on? I mean, But some people might.
Yeah,
And
and we all have our interests for sure, and we all have things that we're very, very passionate about. I just had to double check my desire, my real desire to inflict myself on other people, because
yeah,
that's what I was doing. Because to what end? I mean, what's going to come about? I didn't even really think about it in this regard, but my whole thing was I have to prove to you that I'm right and you're wrong. And here's why. And I can give you chapter and verse. But to what end?
well,
You
that's
know,
what people
are
write.
we going to be best buddies after that? Probably not.
Yeah, but that's why people write books and poetry and song. Like they're
But
giving their thing out.
but I wasn't doing that. See, if you want to be, if you're a Bob Dylan type and you're going to write a song about something like that, that's one way to channel that energy, to channel that passion,
Yeah,
and to put that message out there to the masses. Now, if we take that and apply it to any cause that you see being argued today, just stop oil. Let's pick that for example, because that's where we started on this line.
yeah,
If they were to do something like that, I mean, the 60s were all about protest songs.
yeah. And a
And
pro-
some music we still listen to today are some of those old protest songs.
and removed from the original objective of the songs too. By the way, in many
Yeah.
cases, in other words, people are humming those tunes from back then today
Hmm.
without the attached specific reference points that they were intended originally,
Exactly.
and they've become
They weren't alive during that time. So they don't know what these references are, or maybe they just don't know what the zeitgeist
they
was.
become supermarket music while you're picking out your
Yeah,
next pumpkin.
exactly. All the times they are a changing.
Oh, he's right. It's time to go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
oh man, lunch is over. We got to order, if we're going to order pizza, we got to order from the dinner menu. No, that's not what that meant. you know, but,
Yeah.
but so yeah, but you see how we handled it. We handled things differently because we weren't conditioned that we had the right to be listened to. We injected it into the pop culture and let the pop culture take it. We didn't throw a temper tantrum in the middle of the road. We sang, "Why don't we do it?" in
Well,
the
wait a
road.
second. They did protest though.
They did, and look at what happened.
They got their butts beat left and right.
Exactly. When a certain, because it's a certain percentage of the population are going to want to do that. Yes. And remember, I grew up, the riots were, I mean, the protests and the riots were right down my street. I can still remember my mother grabbing the back of my shirt and yanking me backwards because I was facing the back of the couch with the curtains open, looking out the window. I
But
can
didn't they?
remember she just knew a brick was coming through the window to get me.
But didn't their efforts? Forgive me for just. Didn't their efforts through other means like music, plus that, plus interviews, plus, like John Lennon give you a piece of chance, and just all these things? Didn't that contribute? And I don't know that this is true, but you tell me. Didn't that contribute to eventually Nixon saying, didn't that progress the concept of, hey, this is bullcrap. Let's get these people out, or no?
Some of it did, but the protests weren't what did it. The catalyst was the overall feeling. The protests condemned those methods. The riots condemned those methods. And that turned a lot of people against a lot of those causes. But the the sit-ins and in Golden Gate Park, the pop music of the day, the counterculture comedians like Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, they injected into the popular culture, and pretty soon movies were made and things like that. That changed minds. The Smothers Brothers bringing those folks on TV where Red Skelton wouldn't have them. You know, um, that did more than any protest march ever did. It was the spirit of the age, you know. Um, yeah, people burned their draft cards and stuff like that, and some of them made the news, most didn't. It was a fruitless gesture.
Yeah, but to this
And
day, we hear we if you say that, we think of the '60s.
what ended up happening was people discovered and finally realized was that violence wouldn't stop violence. Violence is only going to incite more violence. And if you start throwing rocks at buildings, yeah, you're going to get a harsh police response. And so a lot of that died down. It was really big for a little while, but it started dying down when people with clearer heads started thinking, wait a minute, we're going about this the wrong way. We're protesting a war by starting a war. What sense does that make? You know?
But it almost feels like on all fronts, though a few things failed, other things may have succeeded a little bit, other things, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like you said, that notion. I mean, Jim Morrison wrote a song, 5 to 1,
Mm-hmm.
where he's saying 5 to 1, 1 in 5, no one here gets out alive, and this and that. And he's saying that as time progresses, for every for every one adult that controls the system, 5 of us will now take the role of administering this country. We'll be in leadership roles,
And just by virtue of age, that happened.
and
Because,
exactly by virtue of age.
right. And as they got older, they became the establishment, they became the authoritarian. And once they got theirs, they discovered, wait a minute, maybe we was wrong.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a young person and you're not idealistic, I don't think you have a heart, because you're coming at this with new eyes. You have a little bit of experience and what you're learning about the way the world works as presented to you by people in authority over you. Okay, and you start to develop your own thoughts, and you hear about all the inequality in the world, and you hear about all the haves versus the have nots, and you hear, if you don't have compassion for people, and if you don't have that idealistic thought in your head about how people have been wronged in this world, I don't think you have a heart. I really don't. Because I went through
No,
all of that myself, and I think everybody did. Well, that's
I
not fair
I,
that
I
he's
didn't.
driving around in a Cadillac when this guy's over here, he ain't even got shoes.
I didn't think that.
But having compassion for something doesn't mean hatred for something else.
You can have compassion and not be um tittle
Mm-hmm.
titillated with certain concepts, because, well, but then again, so
Yeah, I understand, and everybody's a little bit different. But I don't think I think if you don't have empathy and you don't have compassion and you don't have some sort of an idealistic outlook on life, I don't think you have a heart. But as you get age and you get experience, and I'm specifically not using the word wisdom on purpose. I think as you get experience, some of that ideology starts to kind of dim down a little bit when you see that the world is not a fair place, and that the biggest roadblock you're going to face in your life is yourself. I think you start to see things in a different light. Now, that doesn't mean compassion has to go out the window, and that doesn't mean that empathy has to go out the window, because I think those are necessary. But then again, you can't be heartbroken over every single issue of inequality or injustice in the world. You have to learn how to accept the fact that life is not fair and the world is not a fair place. And have empathy, have compassion, but don't be a doormat, you know?
so I'll ask you this, I guess, to wrap this up.
Yeah.
See what you say. Final round, going out the door.
Okay.
sometime in the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
You have maybe, let's say, 30 men, part of some sort of militia slash military group
Mm-hmm.
planning their next invasion. Families and wives and children are back home, wherever that might be. They've got their powdered wigs on, lacking
Mm-hmm.
the powder, so it's all dry and it's all bristly. And they're trying to deal with it. And they're doing a strategic this and that, and they're in the prime of their activity. And on the flip side of the globe, you have someone, I don't know, let's say living in a villa in Montenegro,
Mm-hmm.
um, on the side of a cliff, same era,
Mm-hmm.
1700s. And that dude could have been part of the thing, but he figured, screw that jazz. We're in 1732. Um, they want that invasion, but we have a beginning and an end, and I'm gonna kick it here in Montenegro, considering that, hey, just shy 1,000 years back or so, this 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 was the Middle Ages, or Rome, let's say, and those people that were planning strategic things, they're all gone. So what's the point of that? So what I'm getting at is, um, that relativeness, or that, is it worth engaging in that battle, figuratively speaking, or is it worth kicking it in that villa because there is a window? And that's sort of my question, open ended.
Well, it depends on which person you are. Are you that person in the villa? Or are you that guy out there with the powdered wig, hoping that he remembers that he has to tamp the little ball down the barrel twice? It depends on, see, who you are and where you are determines a lot of what you're going to do. But either way, you still have choices. You know, it may be urgent to that dude in the villa that, you know what, this is a cause that I firmly believe in, and we've got to keep these people out of our country. So, yeah, I'm going to leave the villa and go find my wig. Then again, you may be the dude in that with that powdered wig going, you know what, screw this noise. I don't care if this guy wins this battle or not. I'm going to go hook up with my buddy over there in Montenegro and chill out in his villa. I mean, we have choices, we have priorities, and context, it has a lot to do with it. If you're fighting to protect your land or your country,
It's imminent.
then I think that's a noble cause. If you are fighting to take away someone else's land or their country, I think that's an immoral cause because it's not yours. Stay away from it. Keep your hands and your eyes off. It's not yours. It's plain and simple. To
and
me,
and,
anyway.
and so, okay, so that's fair enough. And so I'm saying that, with that example, whether you're the group of people getting ready for that fisticuff, um, battle through whatever,
Mm-hmm.
or that guy in Montenegro, um, it back in the 1730s or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that's all said and done now.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm speaking to, imagine, I guess I'm going back to that thing. Imagine that guy in Pompeii that his wife said, "And don't come back if you don't bring back a jar of honey." He says,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay, darling, okay." And he's walking down the street. He says, "If I can only go to the next village over, there's a sauna over there, and I could be enjoying." And then he
Mm-hmm.
walks up to the thing, one thing of honey, and then boom,
Yeah.
and he's frozen like that. And then 3,000 years later, some archaeologist, and he's holding a jar of honey and stuff. And so what I'm
Jar,
saying is, like,
jar of honey with a shopping list. Yeah.
so what I'm saying is, like,
Well,
we're
yeah.
we're doing
Yeah.
our thing.
We are doing our thing. And at the end of the day, none of it really matters because we're all going to return to dust. Saw a meme the other day. We all came from dust. We'll all return to dust. That's why I don't dust. It may be somebody I know.
Is that what the meme said?
Yeah.
That's a perfect meme.
Yeah. We all came from dust. We'll all return to dust. That's why I don't dust. It could be somebody I know.
We're gonna leave it at that. All right, guys. So we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time here on the Trampled Under podcast, Trampled Under pod, Trampled Underfoot podcast show here on YouTube.
You know, you'd think after 250 episodes, we would know the name of it.
That was, dude. That was.
I'm glad to see that I'm not the only one that does that.
Well, there was a whole lot of. So yeah. So we thank you guys for hanging out. We also have a site over on Facebook and a website on the net, which is trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and you could go check those out. We're also sponsored by
Harneal Media, your web solution. Look, you and me here, we've talked about this before, and not all of you have reached out to Steve over at Harneal Media to talk to him about your web presence or the lack thereof. So let me urge you to do that. There's a link in every one of these episodes. Get over there, click on it, go to harnealmedia.com and hit that contact us button and talk to Steve about increasing or creating your web presence. If you're looking to start a web store, Steve's the person to talk about, or talk to, not talk about. Well, you can talk about him, but talk to him first. If you're thinking about creating merch, Steve can hook you up with a on-demand print company. You don't have to worry about anything. He'll help you come up with the designs. They take care of all the printing. They take care of order fulfillment. They take care of the inventory, all the shipping, all of that stuff. You just sit back and watch the orders come in. Steve can help you with that too. He's very competitively priced. He is very good at what he does. So, I mean, come on, folks. Give him a call. Give him a shout. Hit that contact us button at harnealmedia.com. That's HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of trampledunderfootpodcast.com. I think you muted yourself.
Well, that was apropos. I said, well, we did it, 250 episodes, muted.
Yeah, 250, and one of these days we'll get it right.
All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. Be safe. Do the things you love. And we'll catch you here next time.
And be nice to one another.
See you.
Peace.
Super awkward 250th anniversary wave.
250 waves for the 250 episodes.